we're going to talk about lymphoid cells. Lymphocytes have three types of cells: T cells, B cells, and NK cells. Regulatory T cells have suppressor T cells and helper T cells. Helper T cells provide a stimulus for immune response. Suppressor T cells turn down the immune response. Cytotoxic T cells attack normal cells that contain viruses or cancer cells. B cells turn into plasma that make antibodies. NK cells, also known as surveillance cells, are natural killer cells and they don't need a stimulus to kill. Reticular cells also turn into reticular fibers. They make an anchor for cells to hold on to. And macrophages are also known as big eaters. So here's a general overview of the immune system response. We start with pathogens and viruses, which are eaten by macrophages, and then are chopped up into bacteria, and then are presented outside of the antigen-presenting cells. And you can see that the bacteria parts are outside of the antigen-presenting cells. And MHC2 are on outside of immune system cells. And then the T cells are naive until they are activated and divides and differentiate into T helper cells, which provide interleukin-2 to the pathogens on naive B cells, which divide and differentiate into memory B cells and plasma cells that produce boatloads of antibodies. And that is an overview of the humoral immunity. So now we're going to talk about the cell-mediated immunity. The antigen-presenting cell is going to show the pathogen or virus to the cytotoxic T cell, which is going to be helped through the helper T cell, which is going to provide interleukin-2 to activate the naive cytotoxic T cell, which is going to divide and differentiate and kill the whole entire cell. They're going to know which cell to kill because the MHC1 is going to tell which cell has the virus on the cell because it's different than normal body cells.
Alright, we'll go over lymphatic vessels. In lymphatic vessels, we're going to talk about distribution and structures of lymph vessels. We have lymph capillaries. They are one-way vessel that let lymph fluid into one direction only. And then the features inside of lymphatic vessels, we have mini valves. They let lymph fluid into capillaries and they're going to shut down once they let lymph fluid into capillaries. Then we have lacteals. Lacteals, they are lymph capillaries in the villi of small intestine and they help absorbing dietary fats. And the second point, we have lymphatic collecting vessels. They have more valves and more anastomosis. Most of these valves follow the same pathway of the vein. And then the third point is lymphatic trunk. Lymphatic trunk, they collect lymph from collecting vessels. Okay, now we're going to talk about the lymphatic ducts, where the trunk, they take the lymph to the ducts, and there are two types of ducts. We have right lymphatic ducts and we have left lymphatic duct. So the right lymphatic duct, they drain right upper part of the body that includes right arm, right thoracic region and right side of the head. And the left lymphatic duct, they drain left side of the body and everything below the diaphragm. And the next part we're going to talk about lymph transport. Lymph transport, we have mechanisms for pumping lymph, which are the same one used in the vein, and they have lots of valves, so whenever we squeeze our muscles, it moves lymph fluid. And then we have lymphedema. It's a swelling that is caused by blockage of lymph vessels that prevent the normal return of lymph fluid. So here is the picture where we can talk about and see here lymphatic vessels, where we are seeing even nodes in between, but the lymph vessels are going through. And then we have here the right lymphatic duct, and we discussed that right lymphatic duct that drain right upper part of the body that includes your arm and right thoracic region and right side of the head. And this is your left lymphatic duct, which also be called thoracic duct, and which drains left side of the body and everything below the diaphragm. And here it's cisterna chyli, and it's the structure that collects lymph from the leg and abdominal area, and this is where we see the chyle goes from digestive tract. Okay, so we are going to talk about lymphoid tissue. The lymphoid tissue, they house lymphocytes and they provide a good place for immune surveillance. And there are different types of lymphoid tissues. The first type is diffuse lymphatic tissue. They are found throughout the bodies. And then the next is lymphatic follicles. They are also called nodules, and they contain germinal centers where we see the B cells are rapidly dividing and becoming plasma cells. Now, the third tissue we're going to talk about, the tonsils. The functions of the tonsils are they remove pathogens from air and food, and their structures are they have nodules that contain germinal centers, and they also have the cracks that are called crypts that help engaging the immune system. The types of tonsils, we have pharyngeal tonsils, palatine tonsils, lingual tonsils, and tubal tonsils.
So here's an image of the tonsils. We have here the pharyngeal tonsils, which you find behind the nasal cavity, pharyngeal tonsils. Then we have palatine tonsil, which you find in the back of your throat. Those are the most common tonsils that you hear about. We have the lingual tonsils, which are in the back of the tongue. The tubal tonsils aren't shown here on this model, but they form a ring around the auditory tube.
The last lymphatic tissue we're going to talk about, it is mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue, and their functions are they have pathogens that engage the immune system. Then the structures, they are like tonsils, but they don't have crypts, and their locations, they are called Pierce patches, but in other way they call nodules, but it's because they are in the small intestine and large intestines, that's why they are called Pierce patches. And as we already went over, the locations of the Pierce patches are, they're found in small intestine, large intestine, and in bronchi.
This is a photo of a model containing the small intestine. And this is an example of a Pierce patch in the small intestine.
Organs. To start with, the lymph nodes. The lymph nodes have three major functions: to filter lymph, remove bacteria and viruses from your bloodstream, and to participate in immune system activation. They are found in three major regions in your body. There are the cervical lymph nodes, the axillary lymph nodes, and the inguinal lymph nodes.
Here's a photo of the lymph nodes in your body. These are your cervical lymph nodes in your cervical region. These are your axillary lymph nodes in your axillary region, and your inguinal lymph nodes in your inguinal region. The lymph node are the yellow dot-like structures, and they are connected by lymph vessels, which are the string-like structures you see attaching them together. Here we will look at the structure of the lymph node itself. The outside of the lymph node is the capsule, this green area here, which walls off the lymph node from the rest of the body. There are also trabeculae within the lymph node that divide it up into sections. This outer layer of the lymph node is the cortex. This inner layer in the middle is the medulla. In the cortex, you find on the outer layer follicles, which contain germinal centers. In the germinal centers, we have B cells turning into plasma cells and making antibodies. In the inner layer of the cortex, we have T cells. In the medulla, there are medullary cords, which are made out of the same tissue found in the cortex, and there are also medullary sinuses, which are passageways through the lymph node. These vessels on the outside of the lymph node are the afferent lymphatic vessels, which are bringing fluid into the lymph node. There are more of these than there are efferent lymphatic vessels. The efferent lymphatic vessels are bringing lymph fluid out of the lymph node through the hilum. The thymus gland produces thymosin and also acts as a site for T cell maturation. It is mostly active in youth. It'll be a lot bigger when you're a child. It is inferior to the neck and deep to the sternum. Here you can see the location of the thymus gland on our body. It is inferior to the neck and deep to the sternum. The spleen is the largest lymphatic organ. It has many different functions. It cleans the blood, recycles old red blood cells, stores iron, acts as a blood reservoir, stores platelets, makes red blood cells in the fetus, and is a site for lymphocyte proliferation. Your spleen is on the left side of your body and is inferior to the diaphragm. Here is a photo of the spleen. As you can see, it is similar to the lymph node as far as structure. It does also have a capsule which walls it off from the rest of the body, as well as trabeculae, which divide the spleen up into sections. Here we have the hilum, which is where arteries and vein will exit and enter the spleen. As we said before, the spleen has many functions. Looking at a microscope image of the spleen, you'll see these purple areas here, which is what we call white pulp, where there are clusters of white blood cells and lymphocytes around the arteries of the spleen. These are sites for immune surveillance. Everywhere else where you see red is called red pulp, and that is where most of the splenic functions are happening, including recycling red blood cells and cleaning the blood with macrophages.